The left will never stop their agenda to take over America. You are their enemy, and they will not negotiate. Prepare yourselves. Welcome to the Blue Shark Show with your host, Mike Lang.
Biden, Beto, AOC, and now we have a split with Tulsi Gabbard, but we've got all the Democrats on this side for national, state, and we got some Democrats locally. But there's some news coming out now with Tulsi Gabbard kind of switching to independent or moving more towards the center. John's in the studio today. John, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Yeah, it was a shock to see Tulsi step out like that. This is really the first, Democrat presidential candidate that I can remember leaving the party this soon after running for president in presidential history. I think it's notable, and I look for her to run for something in the future, either that or maybe she's, applying for a, anchor position at Fox News or something. But it was good to see her.
Yeah, there's something brewing in her history moving forward. We got Nate in the studio today. What do you think, Nate?
Well, I think that Tulsi, when she ran for president, she was the least insane out of all of them. Still insane to a large degree, but she was the least insane. Listening to that announcement of hers, she was actually sounding a lot like former President Donald Trump. And, it's cool to see the tide shifting the other way.
Yeah, she talked about, following the Constitution. And what a remarkable thing for the Socialist Democrats, right?
Well, let's be real clear. She is no conservative, but it is refreshing to see somebody smell the stench of what is coming off the Democrat Progressive Party and at least openly admit they can't take it anymore and they have to step out of the room.
And the wokeness, I think that she's pretty much experienced going on in her old party, along with, and I think this is a big one coming up, is the nuclear war issues that could face Biden and the Democrat Party at this time over Ukraine and Russia and China.
And she's a veteran as well, so she really understands the geopolitical stage and everything we've got going on right now with that. And John, you had mentioned what's for her in the future. From what I understand, she's looking to run for Senate there in Hawaii as a Republican, which, Hawaii is what, 80% Democrat?
Pretty liberal.
Yeah. But being a former congressman from there, she's got the name ID, so maybe she can start pulling them to the right.
And, you look at what they all stand for, and like you said, pulling to the right. Maybe she'll move more towards center, Tulsi, or maybe more of an independent type deal. But, we've talked about a few things about gun issues. Where does she stand on the gun issues? Is she like Beto that, take your ARs away, like Biden? I can't help but think that some of that leftism will creep back in a little bit, but she's definitely not where AOC is.
Absolutely, and I would rather have a weak Republican than any Democrat any day of the week. So it's no contest.
Not just that, but it's good to see Tulsi stick to her guns. Throughout the presidential run, she was very clear that she was anti-war. And when we say anti-war, I mean anti-war for what has become the reasons we've gone to war recently, which are not good reasons. So it's good to see that not only has she kept her anti-war stance, which the Democrat left has seemed to embrace war for any reason now. So she's not only stick to her guns, she's stayed true to what she's been saying for years that she's anti-war, and she's stepping away from the party. That's good. I'm not real happy with her anti-gun stance. She kind of conspicuously left that out of her statement, so I'm afraid she probably is still not going to be with your conservatives on the gun issue, but it's always good just to see someone showing that they've recognized that common sense has left the Democrat Party.
A lot of people, when they're younger, are real liberal, and as they get older, they realize how foolish liberals are, and they become more conservative.
And her statement, part of it reads like this: I can no longer remain in today's Democrat Party that is now under complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness, and those are the two big things, elitist, right, and the wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoke anti-white racism. So there you go with that part of the wokeness, right?
For any Democrat to say anything about anti-white racism, I got to give her props there.
Yeah, and then to go on and say, actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms. So not only she talked about the freedoms, but God-given freedoms are unalienable rights. And now here she is going from the Democrat Party to wherever she may end up, whether it's Republican, Independent, whatever, we don't know yet. But what does that say? I mean, we've talked about it already, but, that's a huge switch from the Biden AOC Beto group.
Well, what it says to me is she not just stepped away from the party, she slammed the door on the way out. We've seen different politicians switch parties or go from one party to independent. And generally they'll say they're unhappy with their party and they're going to be more independent. They're going to think for themselves. But I'll say about this, Tulsi really slammed the door on the Democrats behind. She's telling them, look, these things are some serious major issues that maybe some more of you need to look at. Goodbye, closing the door.
And the way they treated her during her brief presidential run, I can't really blame her. I mean, they just like they stacked the deck against Bernie in 2016. And if I remember, she was a national committee woman for the Democrat Party and then got kicked off because she was supporting Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton. And then when she ran for president, they, rigged the game against her then. I can't blame her for leaving.
And if memory serves me too, I think the Democrats also, when she was running for president, they were messing with some of the way they were determining which polls were going to be used to determine who's going to be included in the debates, and they were shopping for polls to specifically exclude her from debates. Way to go, Democrats.
And she also accused her former party of going after their political opponents, meaning going after Trump and things like that. So, she pretty much says it all, from wokeness, to racism, to fear-mongering about, nuclear war, to going after the other party. And we've seen that with the FBI, which is, I guess they're going to have to start over with the FBI. But going after Trump and all the people involved with Trump and making it just a circus and not going after, Biden's son, not going after, Hillary Clinton.
Biden's son for any number of things.
Yes.
So, I think it is notable, though, in the last week, it was leaked that the FBI and DOJ believe they do have enough to indict Hunter, which anybody who's been paying attention knows that's been the case for a long time. But for the government to be leaking that to their Washington, D.C. favorite crony reporters, I think it's notable. I think it's kind of maybe signaling to the left, signaling to the Biden administration, maybe some changes are coming in the Democrat Party at the top, because I can't imagine that the FBI or DOJ would have leaked this to the media without a purpose. This isn't an accidental leak. This is a leak to send a message, and the question is, what was the message?
And we can go over, we talked about AOC and her line of thinking, along with, taking over Biden and things like that. Let's listen to AOC at a meeting, like a town hall meeting, and she just gets eviscerated.
Congresswoman, none of this matters unless there's a nuclear war, which you voted to send arms and weapons to Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard, she's left the Democratic Party because they're a bunch of war hawks, okay? You originally ran as an outsider, yet you've been voting to start this war in Ukraine. You're voting to start a thermonuclear war with Russia and China. Why are you playing with the lives of American citizens? You're playing with our lives.
There will be no neighbors if there's a nuclear bomb. You voted to mobilize and send money to Ukrainian Nazis. You're a coward. You're a progressive socialist. Where are you against the war mobilization? He's telling the right truth. You have done nothing. Tulsi Gabbard has shown guts where you've shown cowardice. I believed in you, and you became the very thing you sought to fight against.
So AOC got humiliated in this town hall, and they were talking about, people in the crowd talking about, fear-mongering, war-mongering, talking about Tulsi, Gabbard, who left the party, and they voted for her, AOC, as an outsider. Now she's an insider, and she's part of the problem. And there's a lot of things going on. What else did you notice?
Well, number one, I noticed that you still have a group of people that are obviously social distancing and wearing masks, which it's 2022, people. I mean, COVID is called, and they've called in saying that, yeah, you don't need to wear the mask anymore. Another thing I've picked up from this is that AOC is like a rock star, right? I mean, she's on international television and blah, blah, blah. in her district, she looks like she's drawing like 15, 20 people in a crowd. So not looking good for Miss AOC.
No, it wasn't a very big crowd at all. It was kind of sparse. And like you said, everybody's social distance. So maybe, 30 people there tops?
Yeah, perhaps 30 people. And, for somebody that when she came into office, it was like a huge deal. The progressives were, hey, we got somebody. We got a real person, not a politician, and she's going to be anti-war and all this stuff. What do you know? She sold her soul.
Yes, just like they all did. And now they're stuck with it. And because of Russia, China, Ukraine, even her people are upset with her. And then you have the Democrat, Tulsi leaving the Democrat Party. So it looks like the Democrats are kind of in shambles.
Well, this is what happens when real world stuff happens and you've got a woman in an empty pantsuit trying to represent people. People need to remember that she was selected for this position through like a talent search, almost like a reality TV show done in her district, looking for the best looking, most articulate candidate. So they found her a big mouthed, apparently she's able to speak, but you look here, a couple of years later, and she's left the reservation on what she ran on, and her constituents are starting to smell her out as just another stinking politician.
But she went in broke, and now she's a multimillionaire.
Isn't it funny how that happens? Mm-hmm. And another side of this is that as much as the left will never admit it, Trump's America First policies have changed the political landscape across the board. And I don't know any rational American, even my friends that are Democrats, they are upset that we send money to other countries when we have needs here at home that are not being met. We've still so many issues that get ignored while they send billions to these other countries, which end up getting funneled through the politician's nonprofit or, some advisory board or some energy company that their son happens to be a member of, whatever the case may be. It's all a giant scam, and the establishment on both sides takes part in it. And that's why a lot of people say DC is just too far gone.
And isn't it interesting that so many times the videos we see showing the blight that's occurring because of the economic problems here in the States, the blight is always in leftist areas. And whenever you see the videos, it's like mile after mile of tent city for miles. And yet they're sending literally tens of billions of dollars, if it hasn't reached 100 billion yet, tens of billions of dollars to assist in some war where there is no good guy.
And look at Hurricane Ian in Florida. All that money could be sent there to help with what's going on in Florida for infrastructure and everything that was destroyed.
Yeah, and, I do want to reiterate that both sides partake in this. You got guys like Dan Crenshaw who voted to do the same thing. He's supposed to be a, darling of the Republican Party. And as much
misfire on that one.
New John McCain.
Yeah, and it's like they're a bunch of professional wrestlers. They get in front of the news cameras for CNN if it's AOC or Crenshaw if it's Fox News. And they act like they hate each other and they disagree on all this stuff, but at the end of the day, they vote a lot. They vote the same on a lot of different things.
Especially when it's stuff to do with the military-industrial complex and warmongering and war drumming and, constantly keeping our allies and our enemies unsure of what the heck we're doing.
And that kind of reminds me, and you bring this back to local. I know you have Biden, Beto, AOC, and, you talked about different congressmen, and my old congressman, Mike Conaway, for example. He would sometimes vote the right way, but then he'd go down there to go along to get along. He didn't want to be on fire and talk on Fox and do the, Senator Cruz deal, because he wanted to have those chairmanships and he wanted to be part of that establishment to where it's, I got to get things done, right?
Yeah. Mike Conaway, in my opinion, was an absolute disgrace. And, it's funny watching him stick his nose into local elections here now. And it's like, guy, nobody liked you. They voted for you because you had a huge war chest. They didn't vote for you because you went along with Obama while he was in office on a ton of things. They voted for you because there was an R next to your name.
Well, the same as Glenn Rogers, who was a state rep here until the redistricting took place. He was actively cussing at other Republicans during his run because he was so disliked. You know, so for local politicians to be waving an endorsement of a politician that
who Glenn Rogers, you know, you've got 82 so-called Republicans in the Texas House, and he is 54th. So he is like, you know, the bottom third of all the Republicans, and that's from, and you know, he had one of the most conservative districts, yet he's
one of the most conservative districts.
And he's 52nd or whatever it ends up to be, but you take a guy like that that's at the bottom end of the Republicans, and these Republicans are coming from Tarrant, you know, whether it's Dallas County, some of the counties that are 50, almost 50-50, 51-49. He's voting the same as those. So you've got one of these squishy furniture Republicans, and somebody's going to take his endorsement, and then you see that person, and they also have a sign next to Beto. And, you know, we're talking about Biden, Beto, AOC, and so it all kind of meshes together. And, you know, everybody says, hey, AOC is so far left and some people are so far right. I think what's happened is the Republican Party has moved so far to left of center that when you stand up for principles, issues, the platform, everybody thinks it's far right.
The party is on the right, but a lot of the establishment clowns like to live in the middle, you know. Just a small disagreement
I think it's
there.
also, you know, the kind of the semi-death of the Democrat Party in Texas that happened about 20 years ago, where all your Democrats all of a sudden hung an R next to their names, and all of a sudden magically they're conservative Republicans. I think what's actually happening is now that the conservatives have taken over the party, thanks to Trump mainly,
right.
It's now forcing those little R Republicans who glommed on to the conservative movement 20 years ago, starting to maybe have some buyer's remorse, realizing, you know, I'm not actually the conservative Republican that I thought I was. I'm feeling kind of uncomfortable. I think that's what the problem we're having. And so they are blurring the lines. In my opinion, it's kind of the squish faction that's trying to tow the Republicans back to the left. Whereas the meat-eating, rock-ribbed, red-blooded conservatives are actively keeping the party where it is or trying to drag it to the right. And that I think is where you see this kind of friction going on.
And that brings to mind the old, you know, all-encompassing phrase that the left, the socialists like to use is, tell me what you're for, don't tell me what you're against all the time. And that, you know, they take that as a negative connotation, and let's go over, and we're talking about local now, so let's talk about porn in schools. Well, everybody but the incumbents are against porn in schools. So you say, hey, I'm against porn in schools, but what are you for? I'm for age-appropriate books. I'm for good content in public schools. I'm for getting all that crap out of the schools. That's what I'm for, but your leftists look at it because they're for the porn and they're for all the crap that goes in your schools, and they go, how can you be against this? You're against.
You're just
against.
so negative. Why don't you campaign on something positive? It's like, why don't you take the porn out of the schools so we can stop talking about it? You know, here locally, they've had a freaking year to do that, and they failed.
When an elected official doesn't do their job, they get what's called a challenger. You know, and in part of being a challenger is you're challenging what the incumbent has done. And if that means pointing out some failures of the challenger, that doesn't make you negative. It means you're observant. And it means maybe you stand for something where they don't stand for anything.
Well, see, and as it pertains to the ISDs specifically, they haven't been held accountable to this degree probably ever. And we have more people now paying attention to the independent school districts. And when you have that, you have a group of people that are not used to ever being scrutinized for anything ever, who are now under a microscope, and they can't hack it. They signed up for rainbows and unicorns, and while they weren't paying attention, you had satanic cartoon porn get into our libraries, you had the jihadi sympathizer material get into our libraries, and you had a bunch of clowns try to pass a $500 million bond in a district that doesn't even have 10,000 students in it.
So you look at the word integrity, which gets thrown around a lot by
people without integrity.
Yes. And we see that with the PhD, THD. You also see, and we brought it up before, is, you know, I'm a victim, the victim card, you see the feelings, you see the emotional aspect of it. But when you sit there in the forums, you talk about issues, they don't want to talk about issues.
No.
Zero. They
In
don't want
fact,
because
they
Democrats
avoid
lose.
it. They avoid them like the plague. And I'm going to say this really clearly. You know, the issue about Melanie Graft being sidelined because they changed the rules on her in an emergency called meeting, okay, that was brought up in that forum clearly by at least one or two of the candidates. The establishment candidates didn't even talk about it. They did not refute it. So as far as I'm concerned, they are admitting the reason they did that was just to silence Melanie. On top of that, it was also brought to the attention during the forum about the school book issue, about the fact there's still porn in the libraries. There's still these problem books in the libraries.
Issue alert. Alert.
And
right.
the incumbents, what was it? Crickets. They didn't even say it. They didn't even mention it. They were afraid of it. They're afraid of it.
Yep.
That's why.
Because they can't answer it the way they want to.
Not when people are there to confront them.
Yes, and talk about the facts. And the porn in the school is a fact. Age inappropriate materials is a fact. The PhD, THD is a fact. So how do you refute that? You become the victim and you start to play on people's emotions and feelings, just like the Democrats do.
And try to use religion as a shield. Paula McDonald, for example, she says, oh, they're attacking my degree because I'm a Christian. No, we're attacking your degree because it's bogus and you're supposed to be a governing member of an educational institution. That's why we're going after your degree. If you wouldn't have lied to everybody and gone to a diploma mill and tried to pass it off as a PhD and then made the school board and the school district pay to redo all your stuff from PhD to THD, which is still bogus. It's still a substandard degree, not recognized
Fact is a fact.
Recognized by any state universities. There's not a university in the state of Texas that's accredited that will recognize that doctorate.
And then you go from school board, where we're talking about issues and facts, and they won't answer the issues and facts. And then we go to, we can even take the commissioner precinct 4 race, where you have somebody running as a Democrat against somebody running as a Republican, who at least ran as a Democrat, yet none of the signs, none of the mailers have the word Democrat on it. So why did you run as a Democrat? You're a Democrat, but you don't want to put it on a mailer. Same with the other guy that's running for county clerk. They will not put Democrat on their material, but
they talk about how much integrity they have. And it's like, if you had integrity, you would
transparency.
Put, you would, if you had integrity, you would put Democrat on your stuff. But you don't. You're trying to hoodwink everybody and wait till they get to the voting booth.
Yeah.
And then, oh, wait a minute, it's a Republican for a Democrat? I don't know if Grant Wood, he's probably going to spend $30,000 on this race, but it's all going down the toilet because Hood County is not going to elect a Democrat, mark my words.
And same with the guy running for county clerk that had all those, civil issues with, we had Christine Leftwich in here and she brought up the fondling issues but nothing about Democrat on there. And folks, if you're voting for a Democrat, whether it's local in Texas, Florida, wherever it is, you're voting for the Betos, you're voting for the Bidens, you're voting for the AOCs. You are voting for the same people that are going to vote for those people to take away your ARs, to put smut in schools, to keep smut and porn in schools.
That don't want to shut the border.
That want open borders. These are the people that are running, and they have the zero integrity to put Democrat on their flyers and their signs because they know what's going to happen.
And just to be clear, Republicans don't vote for Democrats ever, not a single time.
Even if you're running for mayor and raise your hand that you're going to do it, and now that's a nonpartisan, but we all know who we're talking about.
Nonpartisan,
right?
you know, the GOP has passed resolutions the last several years rejecting the nonpartisan label on these local elections like school board and city council. There's nothing that's nonpartisan anymore. And, was it different 20 years ago? Sure, but that's not how it is now. If you're taxing, if you're setting school curriculum, if you're, running a city, it's partisan.
Don't blame us, okay? Don't blame us that there's politics in the schools like there is, because we didn't put it there. The left put the politics there over the last 50 years, and finally the Republicans and the conservatives have woken up. We've found our intestinal fortitude, and we're taking it back.
And here comes the negativity. You're separating the schools, you're separating the county, you're separating the city.
Absolutely, I am. We are separating. It's separating the people that have a clue from the people that don't have a clue. And that's the Republicans from the Democrats, the people that pretend to be Republicans from the actual Republicans.
And here's what you have for the last 20, 30 years, at least in this community, right? At least, maybe 50 years. You have the Democrats who are now Republicans over the last 20, maybe 2.5 decades. They were Democrats, now they're Republicans. Well, they truly are Democrats. They've gotten their way. Nobody has even looked at the accountability aspect of the elected officials, whether it's a commissioner, a judge, a school board trustee. And now all of a sudden, over the last few years, the elections have changed. And the true conservatives are winning, and the old Democrats and the good old boys, they're pissed off because they can't get their brother-in-law land deals, out in the open without people finding out. You can go through an LLC or whatever, but we know who owns the land. We know when Commissioner Cotton talks about, I'm not a salesman for that solar farm. I'm not a salesman. How many times did he say that? 8 times?
Probably.
Well, by golly, you're a salesman, and I want to know who you're selling for as an elected official. So you've got people that are looking at their elected officials, and they can't get their deals done, and now they're pissed. And it makes everybody else, you're breaking up this county, you're breaking up the state, you're breaking up this nation because you're standing for what you believe, and we don't like you standing for what you believe. Therefore, I'm going to call you negative because you're against what I'm doing as a good old boy Democrat.
That's just the way it is. And they're going to have to get used to it because I'll tell you, the momentum as far as the conservative movement goes has never been stronger than it is at this very moment right now. And
Thanks to Trump.
Thanks to Trump. He woke a lot of people up. Honestly, thanks to COVID. COVID woke a ton of people up as it pertains to the schools. And what we are on the verge of right now is what I've been calling a conservative revolution here in Hood County. And I think that we can really set the gold standard across the state.
And what they're most afraid of, what they're most afraid of on the school board is that we are going to flip the school board and that we're going to be able to solve these problems in a couple of months. We're going to be able to fix it. Because then it shows that they've been sitting on their hands and just being, the feckless, do-nothing incumbents that they are.
Hey, there's another recording of Dr. Glenn. And in that recording, he's telling a group of staff members from the high school, hey, guys, I couldn't tell you this at the time, but if y'all would have passed that bond, we were going to give every district employee a 10% raise. And I can't tell you that after we call the next bond either, because that would be illegal. So I'm telling you right now, so you know before we call the next bond. But what he failed to mention was that bond monies cannot be spent on salaries.
Correct.
And what his justification is that, hey, we're going to take this bond money and we're going to spend it on buses and the giant air conditioning systems that our school buildings need. Well, historically, GISD has always paid for that out of the operating budget, out of M&O instead of the bond debt, the INS side of the budget. He wants to end that practice. But in the same breath, he's talking about how low of a tax rate we have. It's like, dude, we wouldn't have that low of a tax rate if we would have been financing buses and air conditioners on 30-year notes for the last however long. What a clown this guy is. And, he keeps getting recorded by his own staff members, and it's like, I don't think the staff has a lot of confidence in this guy.
See, what happens is, mark my words, we're 4 weeks out until voting day. And the other side, I'll call it, let's just say the emotional Democrat, whatever side, they're going to start saying that the conservatives hate public education, they hate the teachers, they hate everything about what the teachers stand for, what public ed stands for, when in fact they're the ones that can actually fix public education. And I'll tell you this is a test for the teachers. Who gives you your salary? I'm talking about your salary. I'm not talking about pension or anything like that. How do you get your salary, and who signs your contract? your individual ISD signs your contract, and you have a contract every single year that you teach. If you've been teaching 20 years, you've got 20 contracts you've signed on how much you're going to make, where you're going to be, what you're going to do. So you signed up for that specific year all the way through what you're going to do. Now, who pays your salary? Who votes to pay for your salary? Those school board members vote to pay for your salary out of the M&O budget, maintenance and operation. So if they wanted you, the trustees wanted you to make $85,000 or $90,000 a year, teachers, I'm not talking because admins already make that, at least that. So if they want you to make $85,000 or $75,000 a year to start, they can vote for you to do that. Now, if you're a teacher and you're watching this, raise your hand if you're making $75,000 a year as a starting teacher because your board of trustees voted that in. Nobody raised their hands because that's up to your voting board, your trustees. They say they have your backs. If you need more pay, they don't have your back. This is all about what's in the M&O. If they have to come to the public, then they need to come to the public to raise your taxes. But they can do it. I bet you they can raise your salary at least 10% by cutting their budget of administrators to get the teachers where they need to be. This is coming from a conservative who thinks the money ought to go back in the classroom to the teachers, to the students, and the parents need to be involved. That's where the conservative stands. But where have you been the last few decades? Wanting more money. Who's been stopping you from getting more money? The trustees that you go around and give affirmation to.
Some of them. I will say this, with the current makeup right now, you know, a lot of the staff did not support that $500 million bond they tried to do earlier this year. And more staff members are starting to speak out against Dr. Glenn and the tyranny he exhibits as he rules GISD under this culture of fear perpetuated knowingly by the incumbent school board trustees.
Well, one of the most repeated phrases from the incumbent school board trustees throughout this election so far has been the word transparency, transparency, transparency. They want to tout how transparent they are and how they take pride in the amount of transparency they operate with on that board. You don't have to look very far. You know, you look at how they treat Melanie, you look at how they conduct basically all their business in executive session. You look and see how they apparently hid a 10% raise somehow, or tried to, into this bond, this boondoggle bond that went down flaming. It is anything but transparency that's coming out of this board. To be positive, the positive thing that I want real transparency on our school board, and we don't have it in the current school board.
But you can't be negative because now you're asking for them to be transparent. And to some people, you're not only negative, but it's also been called a cancer, that some people are so far gone that we have people out there in Facebook land and social media land calling other people a cancer. This isn't me. This is coming from other people that have been put on Hood County. That's how the politics have gotten here in Hood County when two sides disagree with each other. There's no disagreements anymore. It's a battle. And it's a battle because the conservatives are coming in and saying, time out, things need to change.
Enough's enough.
Yep.
You know, the people have had enough. And it's interesting because I've noticed the conservatives, it's like we can agree to disagree with people. I don't like Chris Tackett's politics for the overwhelming majority, but he was against the bond, and I appreciated that. He's against Paula McDonald's fake degree. I appreciate that. I can work with just about anybody on an issue we disagree with, but just because we don't agree doesn't make either one of us a bad person. It's just, it's a disagreement between two people, you know. But they always want to frame it like, oh, you hate teachers, you're anti-public education. It's like, take a hike, man.
Now, you can be dumb and uninformed without me hating you. And I don't even know how I'll mention this, but Billy Wimberly seemed to have a lot of inside information in his responses in the forum. He talked with a lot of authority on information that you would not have authority speaking about unless you were there, which everybody knows he's talking to the other school board members. But I find it interesting how much with authority he speaks about school board issues, such as, I know for a fact that one school board member won't take phone calls, emails, or text messages from me. You know? How do you know? Who have you been talking? Who told you? Who told you that?
The people that asked him to run, his puppet masters, and someone got after me for calling him a puppet the other day. And it's like, dude, when you have two incumbents and a superintendent that call up a guy and recruit him to run so they have another yes man on the school board, he is a puppet. Cool. He served in the Air Force. That's awesome. I served in the Navy. Cool. That's been a long time ago. But he's still a puppet. If you have somebody that is recruited and takes orders from and parrots everything that the people pulling his strings say, he is a puppet.
Well, puppet or not, I've seen online there have been some who are trying to tout how conservative he is. He's the most conservative, running right now. And I'm trying to think, I don't really remember hearing anything out of his mouth at the town hall that was overtly conservative at all. I mean, there was some fiscal talk that seemed like middle of the road fiscal talk. But as far as being a conservative that today's Hood County Republican Party is going to get behind, I just don't see it.
Well, and he didn't want the Republican Party to get behind him. He snubbed the party on their forum. He and the two incumbents, they didn't even have the respect to go to the Republican Party candidate.
It's called pre-puppeting. There's a term for that.
Is there?
Pre-puppeting, yeah. So that's what he had. Kind of rounding this out and going back to the Biden, Beto, AOC, Wood, Granick, school board, whatever, from top down, we've got a problem. And I want you guys, Democrats, guys, ladies, whatever, I want you to stop telling me about your feelings and emotions and start telling me about the issues and the principles of what you're going to do, what you have done, even though it's been wrong. Stand up for what you've done. And that way, when it comes down for the voters and they go through that column of Republicans and go through that column of Democrats, they know that Wood and Granick, you're the same thing as voting for Biden, Beto, and AOC.